What would make someone walk away from a secure career after 20 years, with no guarantee of success? Would you do it? Imagine leaving the comfort of a steady paycheck, driving into one of America's most struggling cities, and spending your days repairing strangers' properties, for free. That's exactly what Sean Stockman did. But the simple version of his story, the one most people hear, is only half the truth. Because one afternoon, while working alone on a property in Detroit, something happened that nearly changed his life forever. Sean later admitted he was shaken. In his words, it was the closest call he had ever experienced. Yet strangely enough, it didn't stop him. The next day, he went back to work. So how does a person reach the point where they leave everything safe behind and dedicate their life to helping strangers? To understand that, we have to start long before Detroit, inside an office where Sean Stockman felt like he didn't belong. The corporate life that never felt right. For almost 2 decades, Sean built a career in Michigan's automotive industry. On paper, it looked like success. A stable job. A reliable salary. A title that suggested he had built a respectable professional life. Married young and starting a family early, Sean had followed what many people consider the responsible path. But inside, things looked very different. Have you ever achieved something others admire, yet still feel like you're not supposed to be there? Sean battled something many professionals quietly experience: imposter syndrome. Even after years of showing up, working hard, and proving his value, the nagging thought never disappeared. Am I really good enough to be here? That quiet question followed him through meetings, projects, and promotions. Before the corporate world, Sean had lived a very different life creatively. He worked as a video editor and filmed weddings, capturing laughter, vows, and the happiest days in other people's lives. Ironically, while he documented joy through a camera lens, his own daily routine began to feel strangely empty. From the outside, everything looked perfect. Inside, he felt stuck. His weekdays became predictable and mechanical. Commute, meetings, deadlines, repeat. But weekends were different. On Saturdays and Sundays, Sean came alive again. He created videos. He experimented with projects. He worked with an energy that simply didn't exist during the workweek. And interestingly, someone noticed. His bosses. Instead of criticizing his fading enthusiasm, they observed something important. They saw the creative projects he produced outside the office. They noticed how different he looked when he was doing something he truly cared about. Eventually, they called him in for a conversation. What they said surprised him. They told him he should seriously consider pursuing his creative work. Think about that moment. Most employees expect managers to demand better performance. Sean's managers did something rare. They encouraged him to follow what excited him. That conversation didn't instantly transform his life. He didn't storm out of the office or dramatically quit his job. But something shifted inside him. For the first time, someone with authority had given him permission to consider a different path. Still, Sean had no idea where that path would lead. Until one unexpected drive changed everything. The abandoned preschool. Have you ever driven past something broken, maybe a crumbling house, an abandoned building, or a yard swallowed by weeds, and felt a moment of sadness before continuing on? Most people notice it, and keep driving. Sean didn't. One afternoon while driving through Detroit, he passed an abandoned preschool. The property had been overtaken by nature. Grass had grown tall and wild. Weeds crawled across sidewalks. Windows looked tired and forgotten. The building itself seemed to carry a story. A place once filled with children's laughter now stood silent. Sean slowed down. Then he pulled over. He didn't have a camera. He didn't have equipment. He didn't have an audience. He had no plan. But something about the place bothered him. So he stepped onto the property and began pulling weeds with his bare hands. No one asked him to do it. No one was watching. Just one man cleaning a forgotten space because he couldn't ignore it. What makes a person stop like that when everyone else keeps going? That single afternoon planted a seed. Soon Sean returned with tools. Then he brought a camera. He began filming the cleanups, not to become famous, but to document the transformation. The videos were simple: overgrown yards, abandoned spaces, and the slow process of bringing them back to life. But people connected with it. The mission slowly turned into a YouTube channel called Midlife Stockman. Viewers watched as empty spaces became clean again. Lawns returned. Sidewalks reappeared. Communities noticed. Today, the channel has gathered hundreds of thousands of followers and millions of views. Locals even gave Sean a nickname: Detroit's Mr. Clean. But what most viewers don't realize is how uncertain the beginning really was. When Sean finally decided to leave his corporate career, he had never been self-employed before. Not once. 20 years of routine vanished overnight. No guaranteed paycheck. No company safety net. No clear roadmap. Just risk. And belief. His wife, Tessa, played an enormous role during this moment. Supporting a dream is easy once it succeeds. Supporting it when it's risky, that's a different story. Imagine your partner saying they want to leave a stable career to clean abandoned properties for free. Would you encourage it? Would you worry? Tessa stood beside him from the start. The name Midlife Stockman reflected that stage of life. Sean was 41 when he stopped at that abandoned preschool. Some people call that age the start of a midlife crisis. Sean calls it something else. A midlife mission. But missions rarely unfold in comfortable ways. And Detroit would soon show him exactly how unpredictable this path could be. What working in Detroit is really like. Watching Sean's videos online can feel satisfying. Tall grass disappears. Debris gets cleared. Forgotten properties start looking alive again. But the reality behind those transformations is much more complicated. Many of the neighborhoods where Sean works have experienced decades of hardship. Factories closed. Families moved away. Entire blocks were left with empty houses and neglected land. When someone unfamiliar suddenly arrives with equipment, offering to clean properties for free, people don't always trust it. Why would they? Strangers promising help have come and gone many times before. Neighbors have confronted Sean during cleanups. Some believed he was trespassing. Others wondered if he was secretly trying to buy the property. In several situations, people even called the police. Imagine that moment. You've been working for hours in intense heat. Your clothes are covered in sweat and dirt. Your goal is simply to help a homeowner who asked for assistance. Then police vehicles pull up. Someone reported you as suspicious. What would you do? Sean has faced this more than once. In one situation, officers had to step in after a neighbor grew angry about the cleanup. Instead of arguing, Sean calmly explained what he was doing. Often, the property owners themselves had invited him. Once people understood the situation, tension usually faded. But those moments revealed something deeper. Trust isn't built instantly. It takes time. And consistency. Sean kept showing up. Property after property. Street after street. Slowly, neighbors began to recognize him. The man with the mower wasn't there to take something. He was there to give something back. But the physical work itself was just as demanding. Some properties required entire days, or even multiple visits. Massive weeds had to be cut down. Broken fences cleared. Trash removed piece by piece. Under the summer sun, temperatures sometimes climbed past 90 degrees. Sean often worked alone. Hours passed with only the sound of machinery and wind through tall grass. And then came the day that nearly changed everything. The close call. It was a quiet afternoon during one of his usual cleanups. The yard was severely overgrown. Grass reached past his knees, and thick weeds hid parts of the ground. Sean had done this kind of work many times before. But something about that property felt different. As he pushed his mower forward, the machine suddenly struck something hard. The blade stopped instantly. At first, Sean assumed it was a rock. But when he bent down to inspect it, his stomach tightened. Hidden beneath the grass was a large metal object. A rusted weapon. Someone had abandoned it long ago, buried beneath layers of weeds. In neighborhoods struggling with crime, discoveries like that are not impossible, but they are still shocking. Sean later admitted the moment rattled him. Working alone, he suddenly realized how vulnerable he was. What else might be hidden beneath the grass? What other dangers could appear without warning? For the first time since starting his mission, he felt genuine fear. Many people would have taken that as a sign. A reason to stop. A reason to walk away and return to a safer life. What would you have done? Sean thought about it that evening. The risk. The uncertainty. The responsibility. Then the next morning arrived. And Sean got back in his truck. He drove back to work. Why? Because by that point, the mission was no longer just about cutting grass. It was about something bigger. Every yard he cleaned sent a message to the neighborhood. Someone cares. Sometimes, the transformation wasn't just physical. Homeowners would step outside and talk with him. Children watched from porches. Neighbors began helping. Little by little, abandoned spaces stopped feeling forgotten. And that's when Sean realized something powerful. Cleaning a property might take a few hours. But restoring hope can last much longer. Sean Stockman didn't set out to become a symbol of community change. He didn't wake up one morning with a grand strategy or a carefully mapped plan to transform neighborhoods. In fact, if you had asked him years earlier where his life was heading, he probably would have given a very ordinary answer. A steady career. A predictable routine. A normal life. But life has a strange way of changing direction through the smallest moments. And sometimes, the moment that changes everything doesn't look important at all. For Sean, it started with something simple. Pulling weeds outside an abandoned preschool. At the time, it didn't feel like the beginning of anything. It was just a small act. A few minutes of work. Something he felt like doing while passing by a property that had clearly been neglected for far too long. But that one decision quietly opened a door he didn't even realize existed. What began as a quick cleanup eventually led to something much bigger. A career change. A growing online audience. And thousands of people inspired by a simple act of service. Which raises an interesting question for all of us. How many opportunities to help others do we pass every day? Simply because we're too busy. How often do we notice something broken, a damaged fence, an overgrown yard, a struggling neighbor, and keep driving because we have somewhere else to be? And what would happen if more people paused for a moment and did something small? Would neighborhoods begin to change? Would communities feel different? Would we feel different? Sean's story isn't simply about leaving a corporate job. It's about noticing the overlooked corners of the world and deciding they matter. The real question might not be why Sean walked away from a stable career. The real question might be this. If you saw something broken in your community today, would you stop? A different kind of work. When most people imagine yard work, they picture something light. Maybe trimming a few bushes. Maybe mowing the lawn for an hour on a quiet Saturday morning. But the work Sean does is something else entirely. These properties are often years beyond simple maintenance. Weeds taller than fences. Grass so thick it chokes pathways. Bushes that have grown wild and tangled for seasons, sometimes even decades. This isn't light landscaping. It's exhausting manual labor. Hours of cutting, dragging, hauling, sweating under the sun. And remember, Sean is in his 40s. Most people at that stage of life are trying to reduce physical strain, not increase it. Yet he keeps coming back. Again and again. Property after property. Why? What would motivate someone to continue doing work this difficult, for strangers? The answer isn't fame. And it isn't money. The real answer lies in the people he meets. The faces behind the work. Every property Sean cleans carries a story. And sometimes those stories stay with him long after the camera turns off. One day, he arrived at a house where a woman had been praying for help. Not hoping. Praying. For months she had been staring at her overgrown yard through the window. She wanted to fix it. She truly did. But circumstances made it impossible. When Sean knocked on the door and offered to clean the property for free, something unexpected happened. She started crying. Not quietly. Not politely. But with the kind of emotion that comes from months of silent stress suddenly lifting. Through tears, she explained something that stunned him. She had been asking God to send someone. And suddenly, someone had appeared. Think about that for a moment. How many people are quietly struggling behind closed doors, waiting for help that never arrives? How many problems sit just out of sight, hidden behind walls, fences, and pride. Another homeowner Sean helped was Linda. Linda was 58 years old and living with cerebral palsy. Every step required the support of a walker. Her speech was affected, and her hearing was limited. Even basic daily activities demanded extra effort. Maintaining a yard, especially one that had grown out of control, was nearly impossible. Not because she didn't care. Because she physically couldn't. Sean received an email explaining her situation. The message wasn't dramatic. It wasn't written to gain sympathy. It was simply honest. When he arrived at her house, the condition of the yard confirmed everything. Weeds had taken over. Grass had grown wild. Paths had disappeared beneath thick growth. Sean unloaded his equipment and got to work. Hours turned into days. Bit by bit, the property transformed. When the cleanup was finished, something changed in Linda's posture. She stood a little straighter. Her smile appeared more often. Because it wasn't just about landscaping. It was about dignity. About regaining control over the place she called home. And that raises another question worth thinking about. How much does the condition of our environment affect the way we feel about our lives? When our surroundings fall apart, does something inside us begin to feel broken too? A place for children again. Another call brought Sean to the home of a single mother raising several children. Her yard had become dangerously overgrown. Branches hung low. Hidden debris covered the ground. Thick vegetation created places where accidents could easily happen. For children trying to play outside, the yard had become more of a hazard than a playground. And yet, fixing it alone would have taken days of heavy labor. Days she simply didn't have. Sean arrived early in the morning and started clearing, cutting, raking, removing piles of debris. Slowly, the chaos turned into open space. When the work was done, the yard looked entirely different. Grass lay flat and clean. Pathways were visible again. Sunlight reached the ground. But the most powerful moment didn't come from the transformation itself. It came when the children ran outside. They laughed. They chased each other. They rolled across the grass like kids finally free to enjoy the space around them. For them, it wasn't landscaping. It was freedom. It was childhood returning to a place where it had quietly disappeared. The veteran's yard. One property belonged to a military veteran. Over time, life had stacked challenge upon challenge. Health issues. Financial stress. Responsibilities that slowly pushed yard maintenance to the bottom of the priority list. At first it was just a few missed weekends. Then a season. Then several years. Eventually the yard became something that felt impossible to face. Sean didn't arrive with questions. He didn't ask why things had gotten this way. He simply began working. Sometimes kindness doesn't require conversation. Sometimes it just requires effort. By the end of the day, the property looked entirely different. But what mattered more was the quiet understanding that no judgment had been involved. Just help. A doorstep surprise. Then there was a woman named Erin. One hot July afternoon, Sean knocked on her door. When she opened it, she assumed the same thing many homeowners assume. A salesman. Maybe someone from Verizon. Maybe a cable company representative trying to sell a new plan. But when Sean explained that he was offering to clean her yard for free, the conversation changed immediately. Her expression shifted from polite patience to disbelief. "I've been waiting for this day," she told him. Those words stayed with him. Waiting. How many people are waiting for help they never think will actually arrive? The house that was almost condemned. Some properties Sean encounters are messy. Others are neglected. But one house he visited represented something far more serious. The building was dangerously close to being condemned. Meaning officials had nearly declared it unsafe for people to live in. And yet, a family still lived inside. Because they had nowhere else to go. The outside of the property reflected years of hardship. Broken structures. Overgrown land. Trash and debris scattered across the yard. Sean documented the situation carefully. Not to shame the family. Not to embarrass them. But to reveal a reality many communities quietly hide. Sometimes life becomes overwhelming. Medical bills. Job losses. Unexpected crises. Little by little, responsibilities pile up until maintaining a home becomes impossible. And eventually, the house itself begins to reflect everything going wrong inside it. Sean did what he could. He cleared the yard, removed the debris, created a safer environment outside. But as he packed his equipment and prepared to leave, something weighed on his mind. You can transform a yard in a weekend, but you cannot instantly repair the deeper problems that created the situation. The family was still inside those same walls, still dealing with the same struggles. And that realization stayed with him long after the job ended. Because helping people sometimes reveals a difficult truth. There are far more people who need help than any single person can reach. The hidden cost of doing good. Today, Sean's online channel has grown far beyond what he ever imagined. Nearly 1 million subscribers follow his journey. More than 140 million views have watched his work unfold. Advertising revenue, community donations, merchandise, and equipment partnerships now help support the projects. Those resources allow him to keep helping people for free. From the outside, it looks like a success story. And in many ways, it is. But success also brings pressure. The internet never sleeps. Viewers expect regular uploads. The algorithm rewards consistency. Which means Sean must keep producing new videos, even when the work becomes exhausting. Physically. Emotionally. Years ago, he used to run marathons. 26 miles at a time. Endurance was measured in distance. Sean Stockman's journey from corporate employee to community helper isn't just a story about changing careers. It's a story about noticing people others overlook. It's about choosing action instead of indifference. And sometimes, it's about realizing that even small acts of effort can mean everything to someone else. Because sometimes the biggest transformations don't begin with huge plans. They begin with a single moment. A single choice. A decision to stop the car and step outside. But now we want to hear from you. If you had the chance to start over at Midlife and pursue something meaningful, would you take that risk? Or would you stay with the life you already built? And one more question to think about. The next time you pass something broken in your community, will you keep driving, or will you stop?